we're doing ToDoodle 9, and the warm-up problem is how many ways you can sort of make a certain wiggly shape with your name. It's not quite all the possible Tetris shapes. The rules are after you put down a letter, the next letter has to either go down or to the right. You're not allowed to go up or to the left. So how many ways are there to do this? And we've been playing with it some. I'm going to use Christian's name as an example of one that we don't want to just do brute force the hard way and make all of them, because he has a lot of letters. That's going to take a while. So I'm starting at the C, and I have two options for his H. I can have it go to the right, or I can have it go to the left. Are you with me so far?
Yeah.
From the H, how many options are there? Let me make a new post-it. Then I can either go to the right or I can go down. And it might look like this is double counting, but it's actually different, because if I picked first to go to the right and then I went down, that would look different than if I picked first to go down, oops, and then went to the right. So there's actually two choices. For each H, I can go sideways or down. Are we okay so far? So I am multiplying my choices. For each of these two, there's two more ways to go. And then once I get to this R, and I need to do the I, there's going to be two more choices. I could either go to the right or I could go down. For this one, I could go right and I could go down. And for the one that I didn't actually put on the board yet, where I just kept going to the side, then that one I could go right or down. And similarly, the last one I didn't really draw, where I only go down. On that R, that was the fourth of my 4 R's, then I can go right or down. So for each of the 4 choices I had before, I get 2 more choices, again, right or down. So for every letter I add after the first one, the first one is just the first one. Then I get 2 choices. Do I go left, right, or do I go down? 2 choices of green for each of those 2 choices of blue, for each of those 2 choices of yellow, and I'm going to run out of colors if I keep going, as well as space. So all you have to do to find the answer is count how many letters are in the person's name after the first and multiply that many 2's together. So for him, the H is a 2, the R is a 2, the I is a 2, the S is a 2, the T is a 2, the other I is a 2, the A is a 2, the N is a 2, and I have to multiply all those together. How many was that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So if I go to the calculator, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 256 ways to make his name.
Wow.
If you're ever not sure if these tricks work, then try it on the simpler case. So again, the one we started with was Fred. If I write Fred's name, the first letter, there's no choices. Then I have 2 and a 2 and a 2 is 2 times 2 times 2, 8. This 2 times 2 is 4. And then the 4 times 2 again. Yeah, that's 8.
So it's exponents.
So yes. So in a way, we're done. But if you wanted to write this kind of thing more simply, that's what exponents for. Exponents aren't really a new kind of math. They're just saying that if I write 2 with a little exponent 3, that's saying multiply 2 by itself 3 times, because I'm too lazy to write this. Or more relevantly, oops, here, if I want to say 2 times itself 8 times, right? That's saying 2 times 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 2, what we just did over here. So exponent is just a shorthand to save ink. It's not really a different kind of math. But it's a good thing that we didn't try and actually make all of his shapes, because we wouldn't be able to fit 256 of them on our page. Okay, with our warm-up done, our brains limber, more about rounding in ToDoodle 9. We know the basics of rounding. It's a tool. It gets rid of fake extra accuracy. We know how to round to a certain place value. We know that in real life, the situation or the tool will usually tell us what's a reasonable amount of accuracy, and more than that we get rid of. But there's the general rule that says use the same number of digits as you started with, or one more. So let's think about real life. When do we need to round? I sort of cheated last ToDoodle, and involved decimals and measuring with decimals. But for whole numbers, we also might round. So this is sort of depressing, maybe, but let's look at some of these things in the basket. So somebody grab one and pull it out. And we need to think about 2 things. One is just how big do we think this is? And then the other is when we talk about it, how much do we round these to? So grab one of the things in the basket. They're just a mess of them. They're not in any particular order. So in green, the Oregon annual state budget. Do we say the budget is a certain number of millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars? If we're not sure, we'll just put it up in the top corner, and we could always use Google to see this kind of thing. On the bottom yellow, how many children are kidnapped by family members each year in the whole country? Hopefully that's very small.
Kidnapped by a family member?
Yeah. Most child kidnappings are by family members. Okay, 4J students, our local school district. Are there to the nearest 1,000 or 100 of 1,000 or million? How many students are in the local school district? That seems reasonable to me. There's certainly more than 1,000, but when we talk about how many, we probably round it to the nearest 1,000. We say something like there's 50,000 or 40,000 or 45,000. LCC students is similar. There's more than 1,000, but that's how we usually talk about it. How many people have won at least $1 in the lottery? So someone was saying hundreds of thousands. I don't know that one off the top of my head. Bathtub drownings. Yeah, not terribly common. Hopefully it's just like 10 or 20. Some of these I have a list and I can look up the answer. Okay, let's pause for a moment. Let me go through and correct the ones I know. Bathtub drownings. It's about 340 per year. So it is more than 10, but we tend to round it to the nearest 10. Cost to fill a family car's gas tank. Do people pay $100 to fill their tank? Sometimes if you have a big car, but I think it's normally rounded to the 10. People would tend to say, oh, I spent about 90 or I spent about 80 to fill my gas tank, rather than I spent 0 or 100 or 200. Does that make sense about the difference between how big the number is versus how big we round it when we talk about it?
Yeah.
4J students and LCC students, yeah, that makes sense. Murders I know the crime thing is pretty well. Murders using bladed weapons. There's about 1,500 in the US each year, mostly just in a few cities. So that's something that's probably about the nearest 100. We say there's about 1,500 each year. Do I have the kidnapping one handy? Yes. That one is about 200,000 a year.
Wow. Wow.
So we tend to say it's, yeah, about 200,000. We round it to that. Oregon's population, that's in the millions. The number of people who have won at least $1 in the lottery, I don't know that one. Someone can Google it if they want, but it might be like 1 million. And that's about as accurate as anyone talks about it. Murders with rifles and shotguns. That was 564. The most recent year I found numbers for. So like about 500, about 600, something like that, we might say. Defensive gun use in the top. That one is contested. Different people argue about it based on what counts as that. If you are just avoiding a crime by scaring someone away, does that count, or do you have to shoot your gun? But it's about 55,000. So something that's rounded about to the nearest 1,000, but it's bigger than these ones, right? Those were only about 500 or 600 each. This is 55,000, so much bigger. Murders using handguns. Can I look up that one? It's about 10,000. So it's also rounded to the nearest 1,000. But for every person that's killed with a handgun, there's about 50 people that avoided a crime with a handgun. Okay, let's keep going. Pick more things out of the basket. Okay, let's see which more I know. So here is a link in chat. You were curious about some of this data, and here's another one. Oh, that was an ugly link. Okay, anyway. So heart disease kills about 700,000 Americans a year. So where did we put heart disease? Yeah, so heart disease should be highest. It's the leading cause of death in the US. Cancer is right behind it. And lung disease is only about a tenth that. It's like 50-ish, 50,000-ish. So it goes over here. COVID deaths, depending on how you measure it, is in between those. It's not as much as cancer, but it's more than lung disease. Suicides is even less than lung disease. It's about 44. And if we looked, then murders with handguns was only about 10,000. So about 5,000, about 5,000, 5 times as many people commit suicide as they do get shot with handguns and killed. House prices, that was to the nearest, usually thousands, not hundreds of thousands. Portland's population, that one's pretty big. So Portland is hundreds of thousands. Yep, it's in the right place. And the US population is millions, certainly. A monthly rent, I think most people round it to the nearest 100. They might pay 1,000 or more, or 2,000 even, but you don't tend to say my rent is 1,000 or 2,000. You tend to say it's 1,200 or 1,800 or something like that. How we round it. And salary, yeah, thousands is what things normally do. Comments on this one? Okay, moving on. So grab more things and we'll just do yes or no. Are these things we round or are they things where we keep track as accurately as we can? Car accidents per year. So put it in the Venn diagram. Is it something that will always round, sometimes round, or never round? Yeah, I think in the news they always round that one. Vacations, oh, if I could take more than one vacation a year, I would certainly not just say it's one. Grocery bill. Sharks, yeah. Shark deaths per year in the country, average just one. But some people might say, oh, it's like between 0 and 10. Pages in a book, I think that's partly how old you are. I know if my kids read a book that was 372 pages, they'd definitely want me to know that, not to say it was about 400. We don't have to agree on right answers to these. We're not being graded on this, but things to think about. Now we have sharks attending a wedding because of the overlap. Okay, ready to move on?
Yes.
The next one interesting thing about rounding is sometimes the situation tells us that we should break the normal rules, right? The normal rule of a 5 or more means to round up. Sometimes we always round up, or sometimes we always round down. So the first one, for example, a store manager plans about how much profit is needed to be in the black. If you don't know that phrase, then there was a tradition in accounting before computers that when you were writing your store's balance sheet, how much you had spent on inventory and paying your staff and rent and utilities and stuff, compared to how much you had sold. If you have spent more than you've sold for the year, then you would write it in red ink to show you're in trouble. And once you finally sold more stuff and were making a profit for the year, then you would write it with black ink. That's why we have the phrase Black Friday for shopping in November, because for a lot of stores, that's when they finally make a profit. The first 11 months of the year, they're about to go out of business, or they would, except that at the very end of the year with holiday shopping, everyone spends lots of money that they weren't spending the rest of the year. So that was the weekend they hoped to finally be profitable and not just spending their savings from past years. So if the store manager was planning this, should they round up or down? If they underestimate how much profit they need, they could be in trouble. If they picked down, maybe they wouldn't have enough money to pay all their employees. So they might want to always round up just as a matter of course to say, yeah, selling $30,000 worth of merchandise would be great, but I'm going to say I need 40,000 just to be sure that aiming for that goal, even if we don't make it, we get to pay everybody. Does that make sense as a requirement that's different than just, is this 5 or more? As a second example, I'll do. Let's look at an elevator. If an elevator normally can hold, say, 10 people, but we need to make it on the sign, how many people can be in the elevator? Should we say 10 or 11? Then if we round up, even if the elevator is like 10.6 people, we'll be fine. Then somebody else might get on and break the elevator. But let's round it down. Let's put the smaller number there so that people aren't tempted to overcrowd the elevator. Are these two making sense? Okay, so you 3 or 4 approaches here. Do the others.
9.
Up or down, or is it just following the normal rules? Yes, if you need to go do what you need to do.
Are we on number 3?
We're on the painter.
I can't click.
So if you were doing some math.
I can't paint. It won't let me grab the mouse or nothing.
Okay, well, just tell me what to do, or tell Ruthie to do this for you. Let's say you needed 6.4 cans of paint. Should you buy 6 cans of paint or 7?
I would buy 7.
Yeah. It might normally be true that
Yeah,
0.4
says my
rounds down, but if you don't buy enough paint, then you're gonna have some empty spot on your wall, right? I'm not quite sure what this one asked, what I was thinking when I invented that, so I'm gonna skip that one. If a dojo is planning how large a mat to buy, should it round its attendance up or down? If it thinks that usually there's about, oh, I don't know, 20 to 30 people in a class, should they focus on the 20 or the 30?
The 30?
The 30.
30.
They buy the mat for 20, then when 30 people show up, there's not going to be enough room. So the point of this slide is just there are some situations where you're going to round up or down because of the situation, not following that rule of look at this number and then what's next to it. Is it 5 or more or not? Your reflection is think about when you use rounding in real life. Do you use the 5 or more tells me to round up or down guideline or some other situation? And would there be any consequences if you didn't round or if you rounded incorrectly? Would your budget be off? Or would your elevator break or something like that? So think about that over the next couple days.